Getting Jalen Ramsey and losing Minkah Fitzpatrick means that Pittsburgh's going to play a different style of defense. I'll tell you why I think it's going to be beneficial here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is exactly what it is. Your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen, and thanks for joining the barbershop here, the afternoon edition of the Locked On NFL show. I am along with Kevin R. Striker, who is riding shotgun with me right here. That's right, Kevin R. Striker. You can find him at Locked On Ravens. He is here every single Tuesday. He's going to be here today to help us navigate through some of the biggest stories in the National Football League. We would like to first thank you for joining us and making yourself an everydayer. We appreciate you making us your first listen to the everydayers. And if you're new here, well, hang out. You might find a reason to come back, and I think you will. Here's what we're going to discuss today on Locked On NFL. Better than I think if. That's where we're going to end up. Two teams. We did a little bit of this on Monday, but we'll do even more of this today. Talking about, I don't think highly of them, but if this one or two things get fixed, they'll be better. We'll do that in segment 3. Love gets no love. Is Jordan Love that disrespected, or is it just that we didn't have a whole bunch of high expectations? Those things are something that we'll go over in segment 2. We're going to start this thing, though, talking about a trade that happened that affects the AFC North, which is where Kevin R. Striker resides each and every day, covering the Baltimore Ravens. The Jalen Ramsey trade went down. Jalen Ramsey, Minkah Fitzpatrick swap. Of course, Jonnu Smith was added in there along with some pick swaps. So Minkah Fitzpatrick goes back to Miami, but we're talking about Pittsburgh in the first segment where they got Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. What do you think about the trade, first of all, Kevin?
A shocker, yet not a shocker, is kind of how I describe it. I mean, I think the order of events, Wig, is where it's like, oh, hey, the Steelers are getting Jalen Ramsey. Okay, people were talking about that. Wonder what the package is. Oh, it's Minkah Fitzpatrick. Oh, hold on a minute. And then you get Jonnu thrown in there. So, look, I think both teams come out of it with what they wanted, right? I think for Miami, they've been looking to move off of Jalen Ramsey, trying to find anything that could help them. And clearly they still want to try to contend this season, right? I mean, I think you don't make a move for Minkah or win now piece that I think Minkah is if you don't plan to contend here. I think Miami is. They're trying to figure out what they have. But, for Pittsburgh, and we'll talk about, how they need to play defense or how it's going to change for them to play defense. While Minkah's production had fallen off, he wasn't the same player over the past handful of seasons. Still, he's that Swiss Army knife for that defense. And so for Jalen, who also has versatility, I don't want to, knock Jalen's versatility. He can play on the slot. There's a potential that he gets some looks at safety this year. Who knows how they're going to use them. I'm just curious to see how it's going to play out for them. But then a guy like Jonnu Smith, for the Steelers, having him in Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, makes a pretty good tight end room. I mean, I like how they can use Jonnu alongside their guys. But, Wig, I just think that Pittsburgh's moving too laterally, in my opinion, where I liked the move of them getting DK Metcalf. I liked him and George Pickens together. But then you move off of George Pickens, and last year it was George Pickens and friends. Well, now it feels like it's DK Metcalf and friends. You trade for Jalen Ramsey and you're like, okay, hey, you know what? You get some secondary depth there. Nice corner trio with Minkah. I liked that for them. But then Minkah's in the deal. And so it feels like they're trading talent for talent. And while maybe they got a little better here, I think Jonnu was the one that maybe puts him over the top there overall, because I do think DK will have a bigger impact than George Pickens. So I think overall they got a little better. I just, and this isn't even me talking from a Ravens or AFC North perspective. I feel like I liked the moves until I saw that, hey, they're also getting rid of talent. I think that they need to continue stacking, and I just feel like they're moving too laterally.
You're not the only one that feels that way. But my opinion is different. And before I get to it, I'm going to go here to the Peacock and Williamson podcast. Matt Williamson, of course, is a Friday guest here, but he also does multiple podcasts in Pittsburgh. He's a part of their podcast network for the actual team. I want you to hear something he says, and this is why I think this makes a whole bunch of sense.
I think we talked about this. I think they have the best defensive line in the league. We talked about their edge guys being right at the top of the league. Now you mix in Benton, Hayward, Harmon. Pro Football Focus ranked them the number 1 D-line in the league. And for 5 of the last 7 years, I think, they led the league in sacks. This last year, they were middle of the road. Now, they were good in pressures. They caused a lot of turnovers. They batted a lot of passes at the line of scrimmage. But their corner play, other than Porter, was very soft. It was a lot of cover 3. Quarterbacks like Mahomes and actually Rodgers, when he played them, just got the ball out of their hands so quick that the pass rush got nullified. So a huge thing I've been preaching is, how can you make that best D-line in the league into 50-plus sacks? Well, you got to change your coverages. You can't play as much zone. You can't play as much cover 3, cover 1. You need to vary things up a lot. And I think when they got Slay, that was a huge indication they were looking to do that.
All right, so you just heard from Matt. Now we're going to get right into it. This is the thing that makes me agree with the trade. If you look at Minkah Fitzpatrick and Jalen Ramsey in terms of, okay, what is the blue sky? What is the ceiling that if both of those dudes reach their career potential? And some people may think that they already have. What would you get? In Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think you get Earl Thomas. Great player. We know that. He wasn't great in Baltimore, but you know what we're saying.
Hopefully on the field, he was great off the field.
Yeah.
Whole different conversation.
Right. So you get a real good single high safety that allows you to play a certain way. What do you get if you get Jalen Ramsey? Then you get Charles Woodson. You get a guy who can play slot, outside corner, press, zone, free safety, strong safety, whatever. So to me, Jalen Ramsey, even if you consider them even players at this point, one guy allows you to play the way that you need to play today, and the other guy only plays one way. So even for that, whether or not you think that my comps are correct or Pittsburgh believes that they're going to play differently, they're going to be in your face. They thought the way that they were playing, which was the strength of Minkah in the past, also did not allow them to take advantage of the fact that they have a really, really good front seven and one of the best pass rushers we've ever seen. I think having Jalen Ramsey allows that. He comes up, he disrupts the wide receivers, knocks them off. He doesn't let them they don't get a chance to stack him as quickly. And hopefully by then they believe the quarterback is going to be on the ground. For that reason alone, and the fact that Aaron Rodgers has always had multiple tight ends when he's been successful. You look at Green Bay, guys that could catch the ball from those positions. You give a guy like that multiple weapons, especially a guy that likes to throw the hot receivers and guys coming open over the middle really, really fast. I think Pittsburgh won this trade by a mile, even though I'm a big fan of Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, and look, I think Pittsburgh did what they felt like they needed to do. And I mentioned it earlier where it felt like Fitzpatrick had fallen off production-wise over the last couple of seasons. And that doesn't mean he's not a good player. He still is a good player. But I think, to me, this offseason wig for Pittsburgh has been so unlike Pittsburgh. I mean, we usually see them sit back and, kind of sign a guy or two. They rely on the draft. I mean, that's kind of the thing that Baltimore and Pittsburgh have in common when talking about the division. It's like those two teams are run so similarly at points. But, you have them waiting on Aaron Rodgers for, that thing felt like a 5-year saga, but, really only was a couple months. But they waited for Aaron Rodgers. They made that splash. They splashed for DK Metcalf. They moved off of Pickens. They make this deal. They're wheeling and dealing, which is not the way Pittsburgh usually does things. It's very different. It feels very weird. And, I always like when teams take swings. I give teams a lot of credit for doing it. We know it doesn't always work out, right? You make a deal, you think it's good for you, and the worst case, you talked about best case scenarios. Well, sometimes the worst case scenario is the one that rears its ugly head. And, I think that's a risk you have to take, but I think Pittsburgh's on a very specific timeline. And honestly, so is Miami. I think both these teams are on very specific timelines right now. And for Pittsburgh, they understand. I mean, Rodgers has said it himself that this is going to be his last year. These guys are not necessarily young. Jalen Ramsey is a couple years older than Minkah is. They make moves for DK Metcalf, who is a couple years older than George Pickens is. They've brought in vets. Darius Slay is nearing the end of his career, it feels like. They have a lot of older guys. TJ Watt is not 24 anymore. So feels like this might be their last shot to win with this core, at least one of them.
It sounds like what you're describing is an NBA trade. What Pittsburgh did is something that NBA teams do that think they're going to go for it. I'll tell you why it makes all the sense and why it doesn't for Miami. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can, whether you're growing your savings or planning big purchases. Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. My biggest issue is multitasking these days, man. And I tell you, Monarch Money makes that very, very easy because you have all of your apps in one place and you can control your money that way. So you need to just take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first order. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back on Locked On NFL, my man Kevin R just basically described an NFL scenario. Here's what you said about Pittsburgh. They got an older quarterback who said this is his last year. They got an aging, all-time, really, really good edge rusher. They have a Hall of Fame aging defensive tackle in Cam Hayward. You know what they did? They went and got guys who are ready right now. We ain't got to figure out if George Pickens is going to be good. We can go get DK Metcalf right now. We ain't got to figure out if Porter is going to turn out to be the corner we think. We're going to give him some help. We're going to get Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey to play right now. So that's why I think all of this matches up. And then there are a lot of critics of Pittsburgh, people that root for the Steelers that always said, it's the same old thing. They're stuck in the Stone Ages. And then they come out of the Stone Ages and people criticize them for coming out of the Stone Ages. So make no mistake about it. It's going to be entertaining to watch them. It's also going to be entertaining to watch the Miami Dolphins because I think the Miami Dolphins did this in an NBA way also. Even though Minka's good and that's a nice asset to get back, they gave up two very, very productive players for them. But those players carried big numbers. Big numbers, and they wanted to trim some of that cash. Here's my man Kyle Krabs. We got to give the other side of this thing from Miami. I don't think Miami's trying to contend. I think what Miami is doing is I think Miami realizes they ain't got it, and they're just cutting away all of the stuff that they know they're not going to have in 2026. And I might be wrong about that, but listen to Kyle Krabs.
But this deal has a number of significant layers interwoven on top of each other in something that comes across as more of an NBA trade than any NBA trade that I can remember seeing in the last few years. I mean, the layers here are insane. It gets dropped a couple hours ago, and I waited because I wanted to get as many of the finer details as I possibly could. Jalen Ramsey being traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay. Wonder what we got. Oh, Jalen Ramsey's getting a pay raise and going to Pittsburgh. Oh, okay. It is what it is. I'm not surprised. 3 raises in 3 years for Jalen. What are they getting back? Minkah Fitzpatrick coming back as a part of the deal. It's a player-for-player swap. You say, wow, that's really rare. The irony there is incredible. You've traded a disgruntled Miami Dolphins defensive back for a former disgruntled Miami Dolphins defensive back. Then Jonnu Smith is announced to be a part of a trade with a pick swap with Pittsburgh. And then it, lo and behold, is all of these things in one massive asteroid of a rock that was thrown at the NFL world on Monday, June 30th.
The Miami Dolphins, in my opinion, have done something that a lot of teams that have eventually won something, they did something that a lot of those teams have done. But here's the thing. They've also done a whole bunch of stuff that a whole bunch of teams that have lost have done. And that is paying a quarterback they probably shouldn't have paid, getting a whole bunch of wide receivers and they all look just alike, using high priority draft picks on a whole bunch of different running backs, not addressing the offensive line the way they should have, allowing 26-year-old former first round pick 3 technique to just leave in free agency. They've done too much, in my opinion, with this regime with Miami to be considered winners in this and doing the right thing, even though they kind of did the right thing.
Yeah, and then they go out there and trade for Darren Waller out of retirement. So you're like, you see where I'm coming from? It's like it's multiple timelines. It feels like it's like, Miami, you're right. The quarterback situation in particular, too, it's like we've seen that so often here where teams, the way that quarterbacks get paid, if you don't pay your guy, then you're behind the 8 ball and you essentially have to reset. But even if you know that guy is not a Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen, etc., you still have to pay that guy 100 plus 200. I mean, in Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence just got a boatload of cash and, still trying to figure out who he is or who he isn't. So it's a matter of, for a team like Miami, you have the disgruntledness, not just to Jalen Ramsey, but, you've had stuff with Tyreek Hill where he's like, piecing out on Miami and then now he's back and I don't know. I wasn't high on Miami to begin with this season. My trust in Miami has been taken advantage of by the Dolphins. I was like, this is going to be the year. This is going to be it for like 3 years. And then they just absolutely were awful. So you look in that division, I'd honestly have them finishing third behind the Bills and the Patriots right now. So
I got them dead last. Behind the Jets.
I was just about to say I wouldn't be shocked if the Jets are ahead of them too. I like the move because Minka can be either a short-term or a longer-term piece for you if you do want to reset with some things, which I think that they will end up doing. Whereas for Jalen Ramsey, I think there was much more of an expiration date on him in Miami if he had stayed, where I think for Minka, you had more flexibility there. But I think the writing is on the wall where I guess you give it one last shot here with what you got. Yeah. And then if it doesn't work, I think big changes are coming.
Yeah, it ain't going to work. So they might as well get ready to make those changes. I'm just being honest with you. So the reason why, by the way, when you mentioned Trevor, the reason why I think from an ability standpoint and a statistical standpoint, Tua is worth the money. I'm concerned about the concussions. You just can't invest that much money in someone that is in the type of situation where you're afraid if it happens just one more time, it may be, something that we all don't really, really want to think about. So the medical part of it is where my concern is. I'm not concerned when it comes to that with Jordan Love. My only thing with Jordan Love is he gets a lot of mulligans that guys like Trevor Lawrence doesn't get. And I think he gets them because he didn't have the same expectations, but their careers have gone the same. If you're going to say things about Jordan Love that you're going to say about Jordan Love, can't you say it about everything else or every other quarterback? Watch this from Peter Bukowski. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
Are the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love being disrespected coming into 2025? I have said, and I told Matt Derry this, going into the year, I would project Jordan Love to have the best year of any of the 4 quarterbacks in the NFC North. But if you wanted to make the case, especially based on the last 2 or 3 seasons with Jared Goff, that Jared Goff deserves to be ahead of Jordan Love in the quarterback rankings, it's hard for me to argue with that because if you look at the last few years, he's one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league. Okay, he's got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, all those guys, and Ben Johnson. I get it, but like everyone needs help. Look at Patrick Mahomes. His numbers, like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, have vastly outstripped the production with Patrick Mahomes. And you can make the case that over the last 2 or 3 years, they've been the better quarterbacks. But look at the circumstances, the offensive line, the pass catchers, all those things. Every quarterback, even one of the greatest ever, arguably the greatest ever, needs that help. And so I think that for the Packers, they're banking on Jordan Love taking another step here, being healthy. And if you look at his stuff, Brian, the efficiency metrics, the advanced metrics over the last 2 seasons, he has been a top 10 quarterback in the NFL by production, by the numbers. That's what he's been.
All right, you cover a team where the quarterback has a lot of help, but you can tell he'd be good whether he had that help or not. You agree with Peter?
To an extent, yeah. I mean, look, I think that I remember covering Lamar back during those years where he didn't have the help that he needed. And I was shouting from the rooftops. And especially, for a young quarterback, getting them as much help as possible. I mean, you need it. I mean, Green Bay's wide receiver room is extremely young. Now, that doesn't mean they're not talented. They have a lot of talented players in there. But, I remember watching Lamar Jackson carry Willie Snead and, rookie Marquise Brown and Seth Roberts to an MVP and a 14-2 record. So I think that you can do it without help. Like, I think the truly great ones we've seen can do that. And I'm not saying Jordan Love isn't great, but at the same time, I think that the Packers have needed to get him help. And we know the history Green Bay made during the draft, Wig, taking a wide receiver in the first round for the first time since, I believe, 2003 was the year. So, I mean, I'm glad that they got him the help. But we have seen Jordan Love put up numbers and have good years without that help. Now, he didn't win an MVP or anything of that nature, but I think what he showed with, Christian Watson being down for what felt like half of the year every single year, or young receivers trying to grow in their own right. One of the advantages you have, when you talk about a young core, is they grow together. So you talk about guys like Jaden Reed and some of these other guys that they have brought in over the last couple of seasons who are very talented players. I think that Jordan Love has proven that, yes, he is somebody that should be in that top 12, top 10 conversation pretty. I think it's not very close. I think he should be there for sure. But now with others around him, and again, another year of growth from that wide receiver core, what could it look like for him? I don't disagree with Peter at all that he could have the best year of those NFC North quarterbacks.
No doubt about it. There's some teams that want to have good years. Well, because they haven't had very many of them recently. What could change? Teams that I'm not high on is more than just Miami. It's a couple of them. One of them is the Bengals, and Kevin knows why, because of all the shenanigans they got going on off the field. The other one is the Panthers. But I could be wrong, just like I was about Buffalo last year. I'll tell you in a second what those teams could be if certain things happen for them. We'll do it third segment on Locked On NFL. We have talked about the Bengals for all the wrong reasons all off season, and that's the Bengals' fault, not ours, right? The way they negotiate talent, the way they negotiate contracts, and not signing rookies, and just ignoring the slotting and the way things go, and wanting to be all indifferent. That being said, they still really do have a very, very explosive team that has a lot of talent up top. The thing about them is they haven't had a whole bunch of people develop underneath that. The guys that they've drafted to replace people like Jesse Bates, especially one guy in particular. We'll hear from Locked On Bengals here on what could happen to really, really, really help Cincinnati have a year that I don't think they're capable of having.
There's been a lot of discussion around Jermaine Burton this year, but maybe it's some names that we haven't discussed to quite that level of depth. Obviously, we've talked a lot about variance that could happen on the defensive side of the ball, but when you think X factors and you think Cincinnati Bengals 2025, who comes to top of mind?
And this has I'll just say that. Dax Hill. Dax Hill comes to mind. And part of that has to do with his ceiling and his athletic gifts and what I think he could mean to this defense if they can maximize him and if they can get the most out of him. Because I don't think he needs to be just an outside corner or a nickel corner, or obviously he played safety in the past. Like, I think he can be this defensive weapon for them.
Dax Hill, first round pick out of Michigan a few years ago. Loved the kid coming out of high school, loved him coming out of college. Haven't really turned out to be as good as we think. But if guys like him and Amarius Mims show up and show out, Cincinnati could have all of us, especially the people in the AFC North, crying a little bit.
I mean, look, it'd be a shock to me. I mean, you know you and I have had this conversation, Wig. I just can't get there. I can't get there. And look, Joe Burrow is a heck of a player. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, watching those two on a weekly basis and especially closely twice a year. And, Jamar Chase's favorite team to play is the Ravens based off of the stats. So, I think that they have just failed those guys. If I'm being honest, they have failed them because this is not a first to 50 league. This is a league you got to win 4 quarters. And I just don't think the Bengals are a complete team, and Jake and James, they're on the money where it's like guys like Dax Hill will have to step up. Guys who maybe haven't lived up to expectations or have shown those flashes of potential but have gotten injured. They haven't done enough, right? They haven't done enough. And it's unfortunate because I think this Bengals team, we see them make the Super Bowl. It's not just a couple of years ago anymore either. It's not forever ago, but it's not just a couple of years ago. So in my opinion, this Bengals team defensively, and watching those games where Ravens and Bengals, it was 36-34 or 35-32. Like, the Bengals are going to put up points. They are extremely talented on offense. I mentioned those big three, but it just feels like everywhere along the margins, they have not gotten better. And like you said, Wig, they have lost so many key contributors from that Super Bowl team. Jesse Bates, DJ Reader gave teams fits on the interior. You're losing guys from all three levels. And I just think that they are too young and too inexperienced and just don't have enough talent on that defense to be a serious, true contender. Yeah, they can put up points with the best of them, but it's not just about that. And that's why, even as a guy that covers the Ravens, it's disappointing that a team is wasting talent like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, and for them to be good moving forward, you're asking them to do something that they don't do well. Even though when they went to that first Super Bowl, you mentioned Jesse Bates. You can talk about him. You can also mention the fact that Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow all were people that were drafted by them, right? And that's why they were there. But since then, they haven't drafted well. Now you're asking them to draft well and to build a team well while paying Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase. That's the hard part. You're asking them to do something that they were marginal at before, but to now do it with less resources because the guys that you already have are making too much money or making a lot of the money. They just got to step it up, man, and they're going to have to figure it out. Like the Carolina Panthers looked like they were figuring it out at the end of the year. I didn't realize their defensive line, I knew they weren't good, but I didn't realize the reasons. And I didn't realize how good Derek Brown was and how much his absence really, really affected him. Well, Julian Council is right here to tell you that if Derek Brown comes back along with the new additions, Carolina could also improve.
Taking a look at Carolina Panthers defensive line heading into 2025. And last year, it was a rough one. And a rough one mainly because Derek Brown missed the vast majority of the season. And even in the one game he played, he tore his meniscus. And I'm not sure how compromised he was in that game. I believe after it, the report, at least from Dave Canales, Panthers head coach, was that Derek's knees kind of swelled up on him after the plane flight back to Charlotte. And then they did a nice MRI and found out, yeah, it's the meniscus, and he's going to have surgery and be out for the rest of the season. It was, to be frank, the worst defensive line in this organization's history. This defense overall gave up the most points in the history of the Panthers organization.
They brought in Turk Wharton from the world, well, not the world champion, but the Super Bowl. He is a champion, by the way. Kansas City Chiefs, and added Big Bobby Brown to play nose. So that means that Derek Brown's going to slide over and probably do a little three technique. I actually think I like the way that kind of looks a little bit.
Man, let me tell you something. On the squad shows, the NFL squad shows, and I was saying Carolina's the dark horse to win the NFC South because who's going to win it? Who's going to win it?
Tampa's going to win it.
Hey, I was going to say it's going to be Tampa. But Carolina,
they can get second. They get that wild card,
especially not only defensively. And you just talked about. I think they added now. I think if they had been able to secure Milton Williams and keep him there, that would have been huge. Either a Milton Williams type of player or someone along those lines. They were interested in a couple more defensive linemen. If they were to add to what they already had on that D line, I think it would have been really great. Like we know Milton Williams is talented. He goes over to Arizona. There are a couple of other people that I think that they could have brought in. But at the same time, Carolina is a team to me that, there's a lot of Milton Williams went to, I'm thinking of Josh Sweat. Milton Williams went to New England. But regardless, there are some other moves they could have made. But Carolina's not in win now mode. Carolina can build. And that's what I'm excited about with them, especially after what we saw from Bryce Young, where, look, everybody thought once he got benched, it's, oh, man, another one of these stories where a quarterback is picked and it doesn't work out. But I give Bryce Young a lot of credit. He bounced back. He looked a lot freer after, they made some moves, and they gave him, I think the organization empowered him. And sometimes that's all you need to, untap your potential. So you look at it here. They get him Ted McMillan. Adam Thielen is that wily vet. You also get a guy in Xavier Legette, who in year 2, I expect to have a decently big breakout season for them. And I'm a big Chuba Hubbard guy personally. So I just think, to me, on that defense, they have guys. I mean, Derek Brown is, we know who he is. I think if they can get a little more production from J.C. Horn, he can live up to his potential a little more. That's great. But again, I think, yes, it's going to be Tampa to win the South. All right. I'll admit it. I concede. But I think Carolina is this dark horse of all dark horses that no one is talking about, because no one is talking about Carolina, because everybody sees them as that team that, they're not good. They don't have this. They don't have that. Those are the teams we think can sneak up on you the hardest, though.
They're going to sneak up on you. That's right. And I like Dave Canellis. A lot of people don't like David Tepper, and that's why they just going to keep rooting against them. But you're right. The games are won on the field, not up in the owner's box most of the time, at least on Sundays. I tell you what, you can win every day of the week if you check out Locked On NFL Scouting with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, because they'll make you a smarter fan, especially with training camp coming. You need to know more about your roster. That's the place to find it. I bet they know every player on that roster, practice squad. I bet they know them all, because they do that for a living, and they do it better than anybody else on Locked On NFL Scouting. Kevin Ostracker covers the Ravens on Locked On Ravens. Make sure you check him out each and every day. And Tyler Rowland will be back with another episode of Locked On NFL in the morning with the madman, Tyler Rowland. You guys take care of each other. We'll see you next time here on Locked On NFL.